And welcome to another edition of Madden and Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by the Barber School of Pittsburgh, locations on Banksville Road and in Monroeville. Day and night classes available, enrolling now at bsp.edu. Barber School? Yes. Google Barber School of Pittsburgh, BSP.edu. Also brought to you by Ultra Genius Brewing Company. Try their brilliantly crafted brews and enjoy their full kitchen at their brewery in Ambridge, or try the new Trailside Tap Room on the Montour Trail in Imperial. Treat yourself at Altered Genius Brewing Company and tell them that Mark and I sent you from Madden and Benz Unfiltered to get yourself a free small pour on the house at either location. Mark, let's start with Cam Heyward. Is he getting a little schizophrenic when it comes to this whole pending free agency thing? You know, in one breath, he's talking about how there's plenty of places to play elsewhere. And then on Father's Day, he's sending out Father's Day messages saying the goal is still to play in Pittsburgh. What's going on with him, and how has this gotten so screwy so fast?
He needs to just shut up and play football and see what happens. You see, I just don't look at Cam Heyward as this Pittsburgh treasure. I know he's been, very stand up in terms of the community, the service he's provided. He's made All-Pro a couple times, but he's 1-7 in playoff games. They can continue to lose playoff games without Cam Heyward. I'm very sure of that. And he's like all this constant restating of this might happen, but I want to do this and yada, yada. Tim, doesn't it add up to self-aggrandizing at this point? Isn't he just constantly putting himself over, which we thought was so unlike Cam Heyward at one point?
Yeah, I mean, that's where it's gotten, and that's my point. It's gotten there very quickly, and it's gotten there very awkwardly, too, because especially...
Well, he went from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, especially
he went from the guy who really was humble and didn't say much, and now he's the guy that just won't shut up. And God knows we've had enough of those with the Steelers.
And it's juxtaposed with what we saw... the situations with Jerome Bettis and Ben Roethlisberger, two other franchise icons that didn't even get treated as well as he's being treated now at the end of their careers. Those guys had to take pay cuts. The Steelers aren't asking him to take a pay cut. They're just saying, we want to see if you're healthy enough that you're worth re-signing for another couple years at this position where it's a young man's game when you're 35.
And those guys won. Bettis and Ben won. Even when they had their troubles with the contracts and took the pay cut, they had already won. But the Steelers had strong management then. They had strong ownership. Art II's a wimp, okay? He's going to give in. He's going to give Cam an extension. You watch. Maybe even before this season. But he's going to keep him here in Pittsburgh.
And he's part of a defense that, as you pointed out recently in a Trib Live column, is good, but not as good as everybody wants to make it out to be. It wasn't good enough to beat the Arizona Cardinals, Bailey Zappi, or Gardner Minshew in 3 straight games when they had to have them and put the team very much in jeopardy, just like the offense did.
It's a weird defense, Tim, because it has elite players and is therefore said to be elite, but its numbers are not elite. Its numbers don't reflect the talent, honestly, and it's just because in today's NFL, with the precise quarterbacking and the offensive schemes, you have Joey Porter Jr., okay, great. He's pretty good, and he's getting better. We'll just throw at the guy on the other side instead. You got T.J. Watt. We'll double up on T.J. Watt, and if Alex Highsmith beats us, then that's okay too. You need to have, I don't know, maybe even a better scheme than they have. I mean, it seems to me that defense isn't as great as the sum of the parts.
Yeah, and you can't hit anybody, and they're built on physicality. To your point, it's about neutralizing...
It's that 70s team.
Yeah, and to your point, it's about neutralizing individuals on the defense. Schematically, from top to bottom, it's not like it's impossible to figure out, or they trick people into making the wrong play. It's based on individual talent, and if you can limit the individual talent of one guy at each level, then it can be beaten. And I think we saw...
And here's something weird too, Tim. I pointed this out in my call. T.J. Watt led the league in sacks. There's no doubting what he does, right? They were like 11th in the league in sacks as a team. And I broke it down further. They're getting no sacks up the middle and probably no pressure up the middle. And I keep getting told the name of the game is pressure, not sacks. And I think that's true, by the way, because sacks have never meant less. Okay, you get a sack on first or second down. It's too easy to make up the yards. The only sack that is truly meaningful is the third down sack, and fourth if it comes to that. So I don't know. I think that defense is just so flawed, and those flaws are hiding in plain sight.
Let's get to the inside linebackers, Mark. I wrote about them today. I actually do think that's an area of improvement. I do think they have more answers there. I do think they have more depth there, and maybe they'll be more willing to try to create pressure there because they.
Well, that depends on Holcomb, I think.
Does it, or because Roberts and Wilson can complement Queen, and Queen can be an every down guy? I think that really helps.
What that Peyton Wilson?
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep getting told he's a first-round talent they got in the third round. You know, that sounds like them.
Who?
Mason Rudolph. So I'll believe it when I see it.
Yeah, I think
it's funny. They overestimate Peyton Wilson, but they refuse to start Zach Frazier and Troy Patton.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that's just a typical Steeler fan, Steeler media thing to do. You know, like you don't want to rush the number one pick and give them too much too soon. But let's talk about the depth of the draft.
Frazier and Patton should start day one, week one. Okay? You got a 35-year-old quarterback. What the hell are you slow playing it for?
Yeah. And, again, as we've talked about on many occasions, that 35-year-old quarterback, if this actually works out, then you're paying the Kirk Cousins contract you wanted no part of even negotiating during the offseason. Like, that's the hidden sort of storyline in this whole thing about the Steelers this year when it comes to Wilson. What if it
I don't
works?
think it's hidden.
Well, nobody wants to address it.
I think it's very likely that Wilson will play well enough where they won't be able to afford him, and then Justin Fields will leave because he doesn't trust them because they didn't play him. You watch.
All right, Mark, so Steelers fans want to hear from you.
This team is so badly coached and managed, it almost defies description. Yet every time I look up, I'm being told it's done the opposite.
Well, you discussed that on the podcast, especially when it came to the pushback on any criticism of the Mike Tomlin contract extension, which we haven't talked about here on Unfiltered. We talked about it on the podcast for the first time because it actually happened a few hours after our podcast and Unfiltered last week. But you said you got a lot of pushback on it. That's actually convinced you more than ever that you're right. I kind of feel the same way because I've been railing against the extension as well. And all I keep getting told is, well, he's never had a losing season. And I'm myopic. I keep hearing that word. I'm myopic for just looking at the playoff results. Well, if all you could give me back is never had a losing season, isn't that myopic too?
I know the playoff results matter more than the losing season crap for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because
I just think I look at the stuff he's doing with the rookies. I look at the outdated offensive approach. I look at the mindless word drool that comes out of his mouth. And I not only think that he shouldn't have gotten the extension, I think he's pretty close to doing a terrible job. Just like a terrible job.
Yeah, but he's not close to being fired, obviously. They've just pledged what could be up to close to $80 million over 4 years, reportedly. And it's not
good. Hey, Tim, as someone who worked in wrestling, I respect a long con.
Well, that's what it is because...
that's what this is. This is a long con.
And eventually it might circle around where they do have another good playoff run in 4 years if he's still here. But
it might not, too. Tim, let me tell you something. I have never been in a situation evaluating something like I talk about Mike Tomlin, where I get told vociferously I am wrong, but I have never, ever been more sure I'm right.
Well, I just want people, if they could do it right now, if you want to run to the comments section and put comments in, tell me why, aside from 9-8, never having a losing season, what is it about him that is warranting of a contract that's going to go out to 2027 when they've had 11 years without a playoff victory over the last 13 and 7 in a row, which is, you never see a coach retained with that kind of track record.
Why couldn't they have given him a 1-year extension?
To your point,
he's not a lame duck this year.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even done that, but they could have and should have done that instead of pledging $19 million.
I understand avoiding the lame duck situation. That never works out good. But what you're doing there is, Tim, you're just, giving him one more year, and if he does bad, you fire him and you eat the year. The extra year you gave him, but they're just never going to fire him.
All right, so Steelers fans will hear from you. Mark, what'd you think of the Pirates series in Colorado? And maybe more to the point, big picture, what do you think about what they've got coming up? Because if you look at their series, they got the Reds a couple times, the Rays, the Braves aren't even playing all that well. The Mets coming up. I mean, like, they've got an opportunity to play themselves into a situation where the players themselves can at least make the point that you should go out and get somebody for us to help us.
Yeah, well, they're not going to go out and get nobody to help them except for somebody very, very token. Very token. And why does this guy say I sound like a person with head trauma, Tim?
I don't know.
Do I really?
I didn't think so today. There was a little bit of a trail there. Maybe there might have been some buffering issues that might have given off that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not ruling it out. but you know, why? Because I think Mike Tomlin's no good no more. I mean, anyway, the Pirates need to reel off like a 6 or 7 game winning streak, because I know people talk about this glut of teams all around 500 looking for playoff berths, and I hear it speculated you could make the playoffs with like 80 wins. That's not going to happen. Among these teams that are bunched up, you're going to have 2, 3, a bunch of them even, probably more than don't, at some point, put together like a 6 or 7 game winning streak and run out in front of the pack, however, temporarily. The Pirates need to do that. That's how you're going to make the playoffs, by putting together that streak that gets you out in front of 500, way out in front, like 6 or 7 games, and then you can tread water. That's what the Pirates are doing right now. They're treading water. They win most of their series, but what I say last night, Tim, they're only 2 games over 500 since the Skenes debut.
Yeah.
And that's not going to get them nowhere.
Yeah, and it feels like there's been, so much positive chatter about their prospects with these 3 pitchers that it should be translating into more ground gain. But when
you got Jared Jones, who pitched bad Saturday and who has struggled, they're now 5-9 in games he started, Tim, and that's not acceptable. And I'm not even saying that's Jones's fault. He's a rookie. He's going to have ups and downs. But now it's way different. I'm actually putting this in a column I'm writing for the Trib as we speak. When you're looking at it through the prism of trying to make the playoffs, it's a totally different point of view.
Right, and they were afforded the opportunity of not having to worry about that, because the best thing that they could have done was improved on coming into the season. The thinking was the best thing that they could do is improve on the jump that they made last year. But you and I talked about this ad nauseum during spring training, and that was that the jump from what they did last year to go from 60-something to 70-something is not hard. It's hard to keep losing 100 games over and over again, but it's harder to make that jump from 70-something to 80-something and actually qualify.
It would have been harder to lose 100 games again last year than it was to do what they did.
Yeah. Now, are they smart to have done what they did to break up Skenes and Jones? I know some people say that's overrated. Some people say that's something that's important. I just think it's kind of how the calendar falls. Like, they had a series before where they weren't facing the same team. Now they would have had one where they were facing the same team. They pushed it back so that Skenes gets 2 starts at home in this series, which might be the most smart thing that they can do, because now they get 2 home starts out of Skenes and 2 home gates.
I think that's why they did it, to sell more tickets, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, that makes the most sense. Yes, absolutely. Plus, you should be able to beat Colorado without Skenes having to pitch there, and they did.
Yeah, no, I don't blame them for doing it. I don't think it's a cataclysmic shift to have split those 2 up, but I see the baseball part of it too, because they're 2 similar pitchers, to get somebody between them who ain't.
And even with the good starting pitching that they've gotten this year, they've had to go to bullpen games, 3 times now, twice in the past week and a half. If you get Trevor Bauer, you don't have to worry about that.
Tired of talking about it.
The Steelers just went out and got Cam Sutton, okay? And no one said boo about it. So why not get Trevor Bauer?
Trevor Bauer is clearly blackballed by baseball, however informally.
So it's not just about the team thing you're saying. This is more of a league thing with Bauer is the point you're getting at then.
I think it's an MLB-wide thing that the Pirates are more than happy to play along with.
Probably because there's an excuse there to not pay somebody. A built-in
Although it's
excuse.
only $740K. You see, that is the best thing about getting Bauer. You'd pay him the minimum. I mean, it is literally a gamble with no downside.
I also tire of the Sunday games where they play Sunday lineups and it's not Sunday and they don't have the rest of the lineup to really be playing that. That stuff drives me crazy too. Like that last game of the Cardinals series was ridiculous.
And again, Tim, filtered through the prism of trying to make the playoffs. It looks totally different, don't it?
Yeah, and the presumption that Keller could just get you through it, and that's not fair to him. I mean, eventually he was going to have a game where he gave up a fourth run or even a third run, and he did, and they ended up losing as a result.
Yeah, I thought he still pitched okay, actually.
Yeah.
Bad first inning.
Hey, back to Jones, since I know we got a comment in here. This is from Eric, and before we get off of it, I'll just go to this comment early. What's going on with Jared Jones? He completely stunk up the joint Saturday, and honestly, he's not been that good recently. This is the guy the team has tried to project as comparable with Skenes. I keep saying it, Mark. I think there was a lot of surprise factor to what Jones had early in the season. I think there were a lot of people who were looking at it and didn't believe what they were looking at, like reading about it, seeing it on film, and then they see him in person.
They never heard of him.
Yeah, and they see him in person like, this guy's 5'11". He's not really throwing that hard. And then by the middle of the fourth, they look dumb twice, and they're like, oh, okay, well, maybe he is. And at that point, it's too late. Now, unfortunately, a lot of those games they didn't win anyway. Like you said, it's not a matter of him getting a win or a loss. They just didn't win the starts that he was in. But I think there's something to that. Now the book is out.
Although he is only 4-6. But yeah, his ERA is what, like 3.4?
I don't know what it went up to.
That's perfectly reasonable for a rookie.
Yeah, big picture,
Skenes.
yes.
He ain't Skenes, but I'm fine with what he's done in terms of whole body of work.
Mark, how about the NBA and NHL finals? Do both of them finish off in Game 5 with the 3-0 teams having lost Game 4s and bringing them back?
I don't know, Tim. That extra ad revenue, it's a heady brew.
Yeah.
It is funny how both games were routes as well.
Blowouts, total blowouts too.
No, I think they both end in Game 5, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think they were both so much blowouts that it was, it's got to be a wake-up call to the two teams that lost it. They just looked bad. I mean, it was embarrassing.
I think there's less disparity, though, between Boston and Dallas in the NBA than there is between Florida and Edmonton. And when I say disparity, with the NHL series, I don't mean so much talent, but Edmonton is just, they're not physically equipped to play Florida. That's just a bad matchup for Edmonton.
Yeah, there's something to that insofar as, like, you know, I've thought about that watching the Oilers a few times during this series and thinking about it from the perspective of McDavid. Like, when's he going to get his cup to justify all the stats and all that? And if they had faced the Rangers, maybe a different story, because I think they'd want to skate more and be more of a like style matchup. And there's some other teams in the East that could have been the case with. But for them to get their first crack this far with McDavid, this is just a style matchup that's not good for them, and Bobrovsky's been good.
I've seen people say it reminds them of the Penguins in 2008 when they lost to Detroit and then came back to win the Cup the next year. I don't see it that way. This series has not been close except for the anomaly of the fourth game, whereas the Penguins had the Red Wings on a knife's edge back then and almost stole Game 6. So no, I don't see this that way.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, by the way, 15th anniversary of the 2009 championship was last week. I interviewed Max Talbot. Story's still up on Trib Live if people want to hear the podcast or if people want to read the story. He was very entertaining. The guy who was even more entertaining, though, was Tyler Kennedy. To this day, 15 years later, still angry that Max didn't pass him the puck on the 2-on-1 because he wanted the game winner in both Game 6 and Game 7. He was he was fantastic in talking about that.
So he's mad that Max scored.
Yes, he's mad that Max scored. Yes, absolutely.
Fair enough.
No, but that was, it's weird to think it's been 15 years already, but it was just good to relive some of that.
It's weird to think they won the last game with Sid barely playing because he got hurt.
Right, because it was midway through the second, I believe, when that happened. Right, exactly.
Although, as somebody said to me back then, when you lose the guy in the middle of the game, you don't think about it as much.
Yeah,
you know
what? Max said exactly that. Max said exactly that because when Sid went out and they were up 2-0, he was making the point that there was so much stuff to talk about in intermission, it never gave them time to tense up because they were reconfiguring how they were going to do the lines and, specialty situations, all that sort of thing. That was all being done on the fly, so they didn't have time to tense up. And then the funny thing about Max in that game, Mark, was not only was he the goal scorer in the 2 goals for the Penguins, he was on the ice for the Eriksson goal to make it 2-1, and it was his job to go out and block the shot from Rafalski that ended up being the long rebound to Lidstrom that almost became the goal in the first place, and he missed it. So for as good of a job as he did, he could have been sitting on, I missed the block shot on Rafalski if Fleury doesn't make the save.
Whatever happens is what happened, Tim. By the way, you know who was a monster in that game? And
Stahl.
not the rabbit, Jordan Stahl.
Yeah.
Jordan Stahl, like, in Penguins history, very few players who were thought to be valuable were twice or three times as valuable as that, like Jordan Stahl was.
Yeah, if I remember right, the guys on the ice at the time were Max, Stahl, Adams, Gill, Scuderi, and Fleury.
Was Adzi out there? I forget that.
Yeah, he was the one that dove. Remember, he tried to dive and block the shot with his face. Like he dove face first in front of the shot from Lidstrom, and he got it over it, and Fleury still made the save. I'm
sure he had coffee with the coaches beforehand.
Mark, how about the Caitlin Clark stuff? That continues to be a huge story nationally.
Well, yeah, Angel Reese, I guess, hit her with a hard foul, right? Tapped her.
Yeah.
And then after the game, the coach for Chicago, was that after that game or another game? Teresa Witherspoon flipped out at a very innocuous question just about losing the game, right? Okay, two things I've concluded. And not that Caitlin Clark should quit playing, but they don't want her in that league. The players don't want her. They just don't want her. Okay, she's straight, she's white, they don't want her. Bottom line.
Well, you know, one thing I've also... Go ahead. I'm sorry. What was the other point?
And the other is, that, like, the Witherspoon thing and a bunch of stuff that's gone on since Clark got in the league. These people don't know how to act when people are actually paying attention.
That's it. That's the big thing. It's reminiscent, Mark, of like a college team that doesn't know how to take criticism when they get themselves thrust into the spotlight. Or like, you know, even Pitt football, for instance, like coming out for the backyard brawl or the Penn State game. If they don't win and there's a ton of scrutiny, you see our Narduzzi often responds to stuff like that. And then he can sort of operate in the comfort of the shadows of 8-3 or 7-5 or whatever during the rest of the year where they're okay. And like Saturday comes, Saturday goes, unless you're a big Pitt fan, the criticism, the scrutiny isn't there.
Right. But the Caitlin Clark thing, Tim, there's a certain list of things, like a checklist of why they don't want her, that's undeniable. Okay? Straight, white, gets $28 million from Nike, got the spotlight right away upon entering the leagues, uber alles. And none of those things are deniable, and they just don't want her.
Let's get some comments here. Richard says, Tomlin has a good thing going for himself. Just as long as he never has a losing season, the team can continue to win 0 playoff games, and they will still claim that he's an all-time great coach and irreplaceable. He's very replaceable.
That's all true.
He's very replaceable. You could replace him and not win a playoff game, and it's not going to make a difference, as has been the case for the last 7 years.
Well, that's always like on a DV Morning show. Who are you going to get? Somebody else.
I don't know.
Nobody knew who Mike Tomlin or Bill Cowher or Chuck Noll was before the Steelers hired him.
Exactly. I've made that point 1,000 times over, and just nobody wants to.
And don't forget, Tim, a lot of the support of Tomlin, okay, especially from the local yokels, isn't them really thinking Tomlin is this great coach. It's them parroting the party line.
Yeah, it's staying on everybody's good side. And then, you know, like
right.
The best, but from the national perspective on that thing with Tomlin is so much of the rest of the coaching narrative nationally is we don't want recycled coaches. We don't want names that have been heard before. Why not give new people a shot? Well, okay, so the Steelers should go out and hire somebody then that no one's ever heard of, because that's how they got here with 3 guys in a row. You know, right. But for Tomlin, it's a completely different story. Just keep him because he's comfortable.
Tim, Rich Eisen talking about Mike Tomlin is unbearable. It is unbearable.
Yeah, and he always needles Pittsburgh while he's doing it, and frankly is condescending to Pittsburgh while he's doing it. Ron says,
Rich Eisen works for the NFL Network, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's a stooge. By his job definition, he's a stooge. He works for the man.
Yeah, it's just a macro version of what you talked about before, where it's, you know, ginning it up for the local guy. This is the same thing. It's just on a macro level of the NFL.
He is absolutely a stooge. If you work for the league, if you work for the network owned by the league, you are 100% a stooge.
Ron says, I hate bullpen games. Tampa Bay started that BS. Although I feel like Tampa Bay did it with a little bit more purpose. And the Pirates are just throwing darts whenever they decide to do it.
Yeah, but they've won the last couple of bullpen games.
which is weird because their bullpen has not been good. But you know what it is like both times. I think it's at least 2 of the 3 times Ortiz has been very much involved. Just start Ortiz then.
Nah, keep doing it this way. You're winning.
Jeremy says not thrilled with the Steelers extending him, but couldn't imagine them going into the season without a Tomlin extension. Finish middle, draft middle, stay middle. Yeah, this is.
No. The first part's 100% true. They were always going to do it. That's why, I kind of hesitated. I double clutched before I got pissed off because it was inevitable.
Well, I was there too. I read it. In fact, I started writing the column. I could tell as I read back my own column how my mind was changing as I was writing it. Because initially I felt the same way you did. They were always going to do this. This is just what the Steelers do. And I couldn't stay with that thought because I was so mad that they did it. Because they're settling. This is them embracing mediocrity and calling it stability. Yeah.
We shouldn't forget, by the way, that even though Rich Eisen works for the actual NFL Network.
That show isn't on the NFL Network.
Well, but he still works for the NFL Network.
Yeah.
Okay. And the other thing is you can't differentiate what's where and think there's no influence here where there is there. Okay. But if you work for an NFL broadcast partner, and boy, isn't every network, you're in the same boat.
All right, this comes from Richard. I skipped over this one, actually. Richard says, unless Nutting has a guarantee that they will make the playoffs, he's just not going to spend the money to improve the team. He is strictly about the bottom line, and winning, if it happens every so often, is just a bonus. In 13, 14, and 15, and frankly, Mark, actually going back to 11, when they made those trades for Derek Lee, who was the best right-handed hitter at the time, and they got the other guy too from the Cardinals, that Ludwig. They have a track record of when they're competitive, Archer even, they do try to make in-season trades.
Yeah, but the Archer thing, I think the Archer thing might have warned Nutting off doing stuff like that.
Yeah, they could be spooked
because
off
it
by
didn't
it.
work.
Yeah.
It didn't work. The guy, Richard, he was right because if you add payroll and make the playoffs, then you get the reward for your risk. But if you add payroll and in the Archer case, give away resources, but don't make the playoffs, then you've lost the risk. Whereas just playing what you got, especially now with Skenes selling more tickets and merch, it's safe. You know exactly what you're going to do. In fact, you might even do better in terms of finances.
Well, I think the argument actually is, Mark, it's more about making the trade when the trade avails itself as a need. For instance, the Padres went out and got a Rise early, and he's been good for them, I believe. And
right.
The Pirates probably need a trade to get to the contention. If they can squint and see it. So get the trade to get you into contention, and then you can actually get into the playoffs and make noise with your starters. Before, when there was only one wild card, you might have needed Marlon Byrd. You might have needed Derek Lee and those other guys that they got.
You still need somebody now, though, to get one of those wild cards.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But now that the perspective is different. Okay, we're making a trade to be 1 of 7 as opposed to a trade to be 1 of 4 to just win one game. Now we're making a trade to be 1 of 6 or 7 to get into the playoffs and win 2 of 3. I think that's where their head is on it.
I think their head is we don't want to spend no more money.
Mark, you spent some money to go to Cleveland to see the Rolling Stones. What'd you think?
Every time the last song in the regular set is Jumpin' Jack Flash, of course.
Okay.
Every time that song opens up with that unmistakable riff, and it's great. You know what I think of?
What's that?
Michael Keaton driving the limo in what movie was that with Henry Winkler?
Oh, I can't remember what it's called. Keep talking, I'll look it up.
Where he has all those Billy Blaze Enterprise. He uses the hearse for a limo.
Yeah.
And he's taking the kid to the prom.
What was that called?
His girlfriend, and the kid's in the back seat. And earlier on, he had been humming the riff to Jumpin' Jack Flash. And he goes, Night Shift.
Night Shift. Okay. All right.
And he goes, the kid's in the limo with his date, and he goes, "Hey, kid, you like music?" And the kid goes, "Sure." And he goes, "Bah, bah, na, 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 Jumpin' Jack Flash." It's just every time I hear Jumpin' Jack Flash, I think of that.
Chris, everybody was feverishly texting us. I was blanking on night shift. I wish I had.
They were great. They're like it's like time stood still. It's amazing. And one thing should be noted too is that, as good as Mick and Keith and Ronnie Wood are, they have a great band assembled around them, like Chuck Lavelle and Steve Jordan and Bernard Fowler on backup vocals, and the young lady, boy, she does the duet on "War Children." It's just a shot. "Give Me Shelter." I wish I remembered her name because she's great. The sax players, it's just an unbeatable band.
God, Chuck Lavelle's 72 now as well, huh? Wow.
Yeah, Chuck was in Almonds for a while.
So off the new album,
you know Chuck Lavelle is the Stones' MD, the musical director.
No,
he puts everything together. They put that in his hands. That's a pretty awesome responsibility with that bunch.
Do they do off the new album? I forget what the name of the song is.
The single.
Yeah, no, I love that song. The one with Lady Gaga. Do they have somebody try to do the Lady Gaga part, like that long song?
No.
Because I do like that song. I actually think that's pretty good.
If they do, I didn't notice it by way of her, being involved. So
Mm-hmm. No, I figured.
I got to be honest, Tim. They play like two of the new songs, and I like "Angry." The other one's "The Bathroom Break."
Yeah, that's often the case with the.
No offense to the Stones, but come on. But it's funny too because I've been going to see them for years, and you think of stuff. You think of like Bobby Keys, the old sax player's not there anymore, who passed away. He was great. Ian McLagan, who was one of their keyboardists for years, played with Faces, and Ronnie Wood. First concert I ever saw was Faces. You think about stuff like that. It's not a nostalgia show because they wouldn't let it be, but you kind of invoke elements of that yourself.
Which is kind of why you like the Alison Krauss, Robert Plant thing, because it's not a nostalgia show.
Absolutely.
It's different. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It is their progression.
Yeah.
Not that the Stones have, and I don't mean to subtly draw a comparison there. I was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame too. Donnie Iris with equal space to Led Zeppelin.
Yeah.
So good for Donnie. But there's the handwritten lyrics for Aaliyah, along with the little placard about the origin of the song. But the only Led Zeppelin thing is John Paul Jones's bass. I don't know. I guess nobody donated enough.
Yeah, a lot of Alice Cooper at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
There's a big exhibit. Yeah, but that's because those guys donate their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole floor for Bon Jovi.
Yes,
a whole floor. I mean, I wish Stan were still alive and go see it. But so no, it's good. I just you walk through the hall and you see this big Beatles logo, this big Stones logo, this big Elvis neon sign, and then there's nothing for Zeppelin.
Yeah, there's definitely a lacking there. I did like the Eddie Van Halen video. You said they might not have had that anymore by the time.
There's barely any Van Halen there now that you mention it.
Yeah. All right, so Mark and I are going to be back next.
No UFO, Tim, none at all.
Madden Benz Unfiltered. Also listen to the Madden.
Come to think of it, no Deep Purple.
I don't remember any Deep Purple either. No, I don't.
Oh my God. And there's almost too much attention paid to I like punk that era. There's too much of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of punk.
You know what I love? The first thing you see when you walk in is the awning from CBGB.
Yes, they're near
the punk club in New York. The actual awning from CBGB.
Of course, near the gift shop too. Go figure.
No, gift shop. No, the awning's below, gift shop up above.
Well, it overhangs it, right? When you go up the escalator.
No. It's the bottom of the escalator.
All right, so listen, Mark and I, you'll be on today, 3 until 6, Monday through Friday, 105.9 The X.
Whether I want to or not.
We'll be back on Monday for Madden Benz Unfiltered, brought to you by Ultra Genius Brewing and the Barber School of Pittsburgh. And check out the Madden Monday podcast. It's posted right now at Trib Live.